on at once, right?
Right. We always have, I personally, especially during the pandemic, I had a project on every table.
That's what I'm doing. A friend suggested that to me, and I thought that's a good plan, but I'm running out of tables.
Well, that's what happened to me. And then what happened when I got ready to have classes in the studio again, I found that I had taken every space up and every space under the tables. So I had to put everything away, and now it's all tucked away. And you know how that goes. You got to get back to it and pull it out. Once you put it away,
You're ready to get going again?
It goes into that dark hole. Oh, it looks like we're getting quite a few people. Actually, I see several people who are coming to the class next spring.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm one of those, and I'm so excited. I have watched you from afar for probably 15 years, so to get to see you today and take a class, I'm thrilled.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you so much. That's really wonderful. Well, I think it's very much a collaboration. You know, when in a workshop and a class, it's so much about everyone. So, you know, I'm excited to meet you and everyone, and just to see like how we all do it, how we all work.
It's wonderful. I'm very excited.
Good.
I'm also in your class, Amy. I'm Joe Callell from Delaware.
Hi, how are you, Joe?
Good.
Nice to
I
meet
think
you.
I may have met you at maybe a Baltimore craft show or somewhere.
Okay.
Online.
Wonderful.
Just briefly.
Wonderful. Well, I'm just excited to, you know, everyone is doing so much we all have just such different visions that it's just, we learn from each other. And I'm really excited to kind of see what everyone's doing and bring that together. And it's going to be fun.
I think so. I'm excited.
I didn't realize you were from the Netherlands. My grandmother had a millinery shop in Amsterdam on a main street before she came to this country. So I have that connection with you too.
That's Suzanne, right? Suzanne?
I'm Joanna White from.
No, but Suzanne you're from the Netherlands, right, Suzanne?
Not me, Suzanne Deckel.
Oh, okay.
Suzanne Deckel. She's from.
That was up on the site when we first logged in instead of.
Oh,
Amy.
I left her there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I edited it.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't edit it.
And I met you, Amy. Oh gosh, I don't know. It was a Jason Pollan conference way back.
Was it a workshop
that Lisa Gray organized?
Oh wow! So are you in the Northeast?
Yes, I'm in Maine.
Okay.
Yeah. And
So
I too follow your work because it's just gorgeous.
You were close to that workshop then, because I'm trying to remember, that was in New Hampshire or Maine, or trying to remember where that workshop was.
I think it was Ellsworth or Elliott or something like that. It was it's southern Maine. Yeah.
That was
a long time ago.
I know I feel like that was kind of in the beginning.
That was your beginning.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah.
I was just starting to dabble. I mean, I had been dabbling, but I was starting to that was an interesting workshop with,
it was Jason Pollan and Lisa Gray.
But I'm trying to remember the dye that we were working with disperse dyes, which I don't really.
I think he had acid dyes, and then we did vat dyes to disperse it.
Yeah. And that was new. I don't tend to do that in my studio now. It's a live workspace, and I'm so careful about dyes here. And so I don't have outdoor space in the studio, but we do at Aya Studios, right, Suzanne?
We do. We have an outdoor space. And
that'll be fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. We just finished a week with Doshi in the studio, and it was fun. We got to dye outside and dye lots of fabrics. And
well, so on the website when that first came up, Suzanne, I just saw the blip of it quickly, the Netherlands. Who is Suzanne Deckel?
That is Suzanne Deckel. She is a natural dyer from the Netherlands, and she was actually the artist last week. And
Okay.
I forgot to change the heading going
Well,
in.
it's so funny. I saw Suzanne really quickly and I thought, oh, Suzanne is from the Netherlands. So that's why I said,
No,
you're from the Netherlands.
I'm from Michigan, of all places. You know, so we
So
can
is
start.
everyone from around the country here or like from abroad, or where's everybody coming from?
North Carolina.
Stewart, Florida.
California.
Maryland.
Delaware.
Maine.
Oh,
Montreal.
sorry.
Oh, Montreal.
South Carolina.
Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Dingman's Ferry, Pennsylvania.
Oviedo, Florida.
Mississippi.
Newark, Delaware.
Wow, we have a lot of places.
Good
North Carolina.
representation.
Door County, Wisconsin.
Oh,
And I'm in Boston.
how's the weather in Boston right now?
I'm drinking my morning coffee. I'm typically not a morning person, so I had to have some coffee. It is a rainy, cloudy, and fairly cold morning. So it's a good studio day, and I think a good day for just chatting.
Mm-hmm. So you've got a really interesting background, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about your creative journey and how you got into what you were doing. What inspired you to do the work that you do right now? And I think everybody's interested in hearing everything.
I was thinking about that, like where do you actually start? You know, I think the pandemic and all that's gone on in this last year has certainly given us all a lot of time for reflection. And I've been really thinking about that, because I think when we're in the process of working, you're present, you're kind of right there. And sometimes you forget to reflect. You know, you kind of go from one thing to the other and forget to have that time to come back and gather and reflect, you know, like where did that come from and why did I do that and where am I going and what do I want? You know, that reflection time is that place of stillness is actually so crucial. And so I've been really appreciating that over the last year. And so, you know, I started at a really young age. You know, I grew up in a family where we all made what we needed. You know, my father built things for the house and my mother was a seamstress and a quilter. And so I luxuriated in her scrap piles, and I rearranged all the threads by color. And I just spent a lot of time just feeling the materials in the studio and always kind of in awe of these quilts that she was creating. And actually that makes me think of, you know, she passed away a number of years ago, and we had a wonderful ceremony to kind of honor her. And what was so beautiful in the church is that they brought in about 20 of her quilts and hung them all over the church. And the funnier part of this is that somebody said, oh, I at some point in time said, you know, I want a picture of, you know, of your mother working, you know, like quilting, you know, can we have that picture? And we realized in the family that we didn't have a picture of her actually quilting or sitting at the machine. It was always, you know, I mean, back in the day, we didn't have iPhones, we didn't snap everything. We were just present with this work. And so, you know, I think about how deeply just that presence and that knowledge of sitting there with materials just really resonates with me. And And so over the years, I obviously explored many, many different things. I thought I was going to be a marine biologist. I thought I was going to be a manager of clothing stores. I thought I was going to be a costume designer. All sorts of ideas. I wanted to be a dancer. But funny enough, I remember at a young age that there was a conversation that my mother actually had with the ballet teacher, who said, I kind of heard a bit of this conversation, and she said, your daughter doesn't have the right body to go on pointe. And I thought, thinking back and reflecting on that, I thought, wow, that's the sort of thing that can really change someone's life. Whether you hear, oh, this person is your daughter is fantastic at pointe, or your daughter is, doesn't have the right body. And so I think, interestingly enough, that is what has driven me over the years. I think I always wanted to sort of change my shape and kind of, make myself feel good. And clothing does that. Clothing shapes us. And so I've always loved the ability to know how to drape clothing and to, to really be able to kind of take anything and make it work on the body. So that's been a kind of very important driving force. And then over the years, I think I have always just loved art. So I loved color growing up, rainbows. I was obsessed with rainbows when I was young. And so bringing all of that color and love of surface design into clothing is really where, years ago when I went in this direction, I started to feel really whole. I started to feel like, oh, this is it. This is me. And that was, that came about through actually what was really wonderful is a meeting with Mary Edna Fraser, who's an amazing batik artist. If you don't know her work, it's really worth checking her out. But she lives in Charleston, South Carolina. And when I got into costume and went to school for art, that was the easiest thing that the umbrella that I could see that encompassed all these things that I loved. We collaborated on a project and got together, and I worked on some dresses for her daughters, and I got to see her dye studio at the time. And I just was blown away. She saw some of my paintings and said, have you ever thought about putting these onto fabric? And I thought, well, now I am thinking about this. And so I think I just started exploring, and I got into a little bit of work initially with Gouda and like creating resist lines, which was really, just a way of drawing. So creating these lines and then kind of bringing the color in, and that beautiful, bleed that would happen, and then have that sort of barrier resist, so to speak. That was really my first exploration in dye work. And then I found years later, I worked at New York University in the Department of Design for Stage and Film, and I was doing admin work, but it was with Susan Hilferty, who's a costume designer. And so I always had access to the library, and I found her book on Ishiku Kubota. And I don't know if you all know the Symphony of Light kimonos, but they are just, I'll pause for a moment there, because it's so extraordinary. And when you see and have the experience of feeling work that's that studied and deep, it's really, I'm in awe of some of these artists. And so that's what sort of brought me to shibori. And then I looked up shibori, and I found that there was a class at Penland being taught by Yoshiko Wada.
Oh, wow.
and I signed up for it. So it was kind of the first introduction to shibori. And that class, I don't know, 15, gosh, it's been over 15 years ago, really shaped quite a bit of my work. I mean, I'm still going through the notes from that class and using them today. So going into that class, Yoshiko is a fiery woman and is an artist herself, and she will, if she sees something here, she'll go off in that direction and you just go with her. It's like it's the most exciting thing. And so Joy Boutrup was teaching upstairs, and she said, class, we're going to go upstairs for the day. We're going to study with Joy, and we're going to make this a collaborative workshop, and we're going to bring the two classes together, and it's going to be crazy, and you're going to learn about 21 different types of dye methods. And it was really quite extraordinary. I don't think I slept. And I took the ideas of Yoshiko's kind of conceptual shibori and some of the techniques that were taught and the dye work, and just worked for years. I think I just fell in love, and I just started exploring, and it was nonstop since. And so interestingly, I mean, I was kind of looking at some of my books today, but I started this practice around that time of just creating, taking like half-hour a day, an hour a day, and just like sewing things together.
Oh,
and
nice.
just playing. And it was a lot more, I mean, this was actually a lot of just sometimes dyeing, sometimes sewing, sometimes just playing with fabrics to see what would happen. I mean, just quick kind of studies. And that will feed you, because you'll discover, it's almost like sketching. You'll discover just little things that will, again, kind of bring you in a direction. And then you can say, oh, actually, I really wanted to learn embroidery. And so let's do that for a while. And then let's bring that into the dyeing. And then let's, look at surface design in a different way. So that practice, even if it's just, 10 minutes of sketching, even with thread, particularly like thread sketching, just kind of drawing with thread, by hand or machine, I think is really an invaluable practice. And if it's by hand, you can gather that up, throw it in a dye pot, and just see what comes up from a resist standpoint. And so taking that class, I mean, that was the conceptual aspect of shibori. It was some of the shibori technique, but it was color. And so any of you who've worked with dyes, there is a lot of information. I mean, it is a lifetime study of dyes. And even now, in the last, I'd say probably 3 or 4 years, I've been starting to dabble in natural dyeing. And it is just an endless exploration. But I'm really aware that I think kind of taking these little, veering off on these little paths really is really valuable to developing in whatever direction you're choosing to head. So I've kind of allowed that of myself. And so I've gotten very much into fiber reactive dyes and acid dyes over the years, and how you explore each of those with shibori and also with katazome and with roketsuzome. So I've done some wax work, and shibori I'm always coming back to. It's like just this traditional, something like, I mean, this is just basic itajime dyeing, but then, like, what do you do with that? That's an exploration of cutting and piecing, and that quilting comes back to my mom. So That same fabric is this scrap weaving. You know, it's I'm taking my, all my scraps of the garments I make and cutting those into strips, like continuous strips, and weaving. So, it's really, how many ways can you explore just like a simple square, a simple shape, a simple piece of itajime. I think when I kind of keep doing some of these simple, simple itajime designs, it allows for more exploration of some of my paths, in terms of quilting and piecing and other dye work and stenciling. And it just allows for me to sort of bring in my experience. So there's a deep honoring of the tradition, but also bringing in, your own experience. And I think that's really, really valuable. And that's who we are as artists. So it's a constant learning, and then bringing in what I've learned. Gosh.
So what do you think were some of your biggest challenges?
I mean, time is always a challenge. I think we all experience that. Having the time to do that, making time to have these practices, and, pull away from the everyday grind and take, 10 minutes or a half an hour and do something that is totally unexpected. I think that when we have these ideas going into, I'm going to work for a half hour, but I'm going to expect myself to make this perfect
Make more of it.
shirt or pattern or something, it's really useful to get away from that and just go, it's like playtime. It's like being a kid and just getting your hands in the work. So I think that's always a challenge, coming back to that, to make sure that you take that time. It's really where I think it's really where the most growth happens. Do you find that too?
Yeah, I do. And then you live in your workspace. So, to make that break between work and play, and, what other types of things do you do to escape the studio? I know you have a meditation practice that you do that keeps you going. But what other types of things do you do to break the work?
Well, I think that's what's interesting. And I think that's where I feel, even before the pandemic, I was sort of feeling on, I don't want to say shaky ground, but because I was feeling an energy of excitement coming through before the pandemic, but also kind of nervous about, like, where am I going? Because my other interest, which is really, I would say, really equal to textiles, is the textile of my body. So working with taichi and qigong and yoga and meditation, during the pandemic, I looked back at my resume and I thought, wow, I started studying yoga around the same time that I actually got into textile work. And the textile work developed over time, but then I found Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation. So for the last, I'd say the last 7 or 8 years, I've been really heavily focused on Tai Chi and Qigong. And, they're equal now. So I can't do my textiles without having that body movement practice. And likewise, the textile practice feeds my body movement practice. So they work both ways. But I think the practice of craft really opened me up to some of the more I don't want to say esoteric, but these other sides of like working with energy and kind of working with the body, really understanding the body in a different way. Kind of working with my body and mind. And what I'm coming to really understand now is there's such a connection in all of this. I mean, it's like when you're working with fabric and fibers, you're taking care of your body, you know, and then you realize though, also, if you've done a lot of fiber work and you're sitting there, you know, like in a position like this for a while, which is really easy to get into, if you get up and move your body and really just, I mean, not crazy movements, but really, I'm talking very, very gentle kinds of things. You know, I mean, I tend to like, I mean, I think as an artist, I tend to go very far, and I've studied, you know, some kind of deep qigong and things that are, you know, that are very personal, but they do drive my textile work. But when you come back to the kind of scientific side of taichi and qigong, you know, there's scientific proof that doing these body movements really, really changes your nervous system, kind of really, really changes things. And what I would love to do, I would love to show this with craft.
Oh, I would love for you to do it.
So, I mean, but to have the scientific proof that, you know, shibori for me it's a healing modality. So I would put like tai chi, qigong, yoga, shibori, like all in the same category. But I think having all these different tools and knowing when and where to kind of bring them in, knowing what your body needs is really valuable. And so that's what we each bring to the table, because I don't know how each person is feeling today. And maybe just the thought of moving the body is irritating, or maybe you just need to sit and, you know, do crochet and kind of get into that really meditative moment, meditative structure. So it's really, it's having the ability to have more languages and more tools. And the funny thing is, during the pandemic, I went back to my notes again from Yoshiko, from the Penland class. And one of the first books that she recommended, and so this was 15 years ago, was The Hand. So it's a book that's all about what the hand and how it's related to the body, and how it's, you know, just this interconnectivity of just the way we move, and what the hand offers, you know, the movements of the hand. And if you've seen you know, traditional shibori artisans doing shibori work, you know, they're flipping their little thing under the, you know, kind of moving around, creating like kumo shibori. You know, there's movements, there's ways to access some of the patterning that we create through these different surface design techniques. So I know I'm blending a lot of body movement and surface design, but I'm unbelievably excited about this possibility of really kind of bringing more of these tools into the world, where you know, we need a point of access for more people to feel I don't know, just to feel comfortable with healing, like a culture that kind of creates craft and healing that's my vision.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. And
Suzanne, you're on mute. There you go.
It's really,
Amy, it's Lindsay. I
really
just
windy
discovered
here.
that book, The Hand.
Oh, excellent.
I just started reading it. Yeah, I got it off of another sewing blog. So
Oh, excellent.
I'm so glad you mentioned it. It's really wonderful.
Good.
Is there anything that that you further want to try in the future that you haven't done yet?
I mean, I'd love to travel more. You know, so coming to do a workshop is a nice thing. I definitely think traveling, but I feel like now, I mean, I really have, you know, I have my shibori practice, and there's so many directions to go in that. I'm doing a little bit more in katazome work, and there's a lot of exploration there. Natural dyes, we all know, pigments, you know, there's exploration there. And then I have this, you know, movement practice. So that's kind of, I would say that's the dance, you know, it's whether it's, you know, it's good to have that some kind of a movement practice, you know, even if it's just walking. But for me, it's taichi and qigong, and kind of accessing, you know, body mind. So I feel like, whew, it's a lot.
It is a lot. It is. So do you ever feel blocked?
You know, I think I did during the pandemic. I think I really, in the beginning, we were one of the first studios that was really hit in Boston, because one of the photographers in our building was a photographer at the Biogen conference. So we found out, you know, and just I had to really immediately shut everything down very quickly. And that was hard. And it was hard to access groceries, medicine. It really blocked. I mean, I felt really terrified. But what was interesting is that, you know, it takes others sometimes to kind of pull you out of your position. And so one of the artists in the building, who's a tailor who I've studied some tailoring with before, Philip Sawyer, his wife Ayn works for Southeast Asian Coalition, and she said, "Can you make masks for us? We need masks." And so there it is that craft coming back. So I made a couple dozen masks for them, and then I made them for people in the building. And then I didn't know where I was going. I thought maybe I have to start a business making masks, since all the shows and teaching has been canceled. So I sort of started that for a little bit, and kind of, mask making is not my favorite thing, you know? And so I ended up going back to, you know, just kind of the orders that I was working on, and kind of finishing, you know, projects and things that I really needed to finish. But it kind of, after that block, it immediately went back to craft. And then that opened me up again to my kind of working with the body.
So when you're working on your pieces, do they just evolve, or do you see something finished before you start?
Both.
Both.
Sometimes I have a strong vision about something I want to see. And then it's a consideration of, well, how do I arrive at that? It's like studying, you know, old kimono, and kind of thinking, well, how did they arrive at that? You know, is that katazome? Was that, you know, cap shibori? You know, how did they arrive at that? And figuring out how the colors were layered. Other times, it's definitely just the process. I mean, all of the kind of the weaving and these different samples, that's just kind of working from what comes up. And I think that kind of both really drive me in different ways.
I can't help but spin off of what you said, because I've been trying to integrate my spiritual practice with my work, and I couldn't figure it out until you talked about Tai Chi and Qigong. I just got introduced to Qigong. I have a meditation practice, and I just thought they were two separate things, because that's how I make money, and you know, it's very glamorous and it doesn't feel connected. So I really am grateful. That's why I came today, to hear you talk about blending it. Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah, I think it's.
Is it only me that's losing connection?
No, we all are.
Oh, okay.
It's funny, because right as we lost connection, I just said, we're really we're so connected with all that we do. But the thing is, I think we remained connected, and it's like the technology is just like a side thing.
And Amy, excuse me. Good. Amy, when you were talking about movement of hands and so forth, I am also a calligrapher and studied with a gentleman from South Africa. And one of the main things he talked about in his first lessons here in San Francisco was the movement of his hands, body, fingers, the whole thing all connecting together when we were doing our calligraphy of all things. So it's very interesting. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you. That's see, I think it's like it's with all art practices and all body practices, and it's the experience that's coming through. And I think that's what connects us the most. I mean, more so than technology. Technology is wonderful. And I don't know what we would do without it. I mean, what would we have done without it during the pandemic? But I think in terms of, really healing, when you think about just the craft practice, I mean, coming back to shibori, you can sit there for hours and just really get lost in the flow of something. And that is so valuable. It's so valuable to, we don't realize how valuable it is, but I think what it creates is when we're at peace, it just creates this ripple effect that extends. And I think as we, right now we're in a certain way, we're pushing back against so much. I think there's we have so many systems. I mean, I'm not going to get political here, but we have so many systems in this country that are not necessarily working. And what I often think about is, the roots of kind of indigenous cultures and how we've forgotten to take care of the earth. And that means taking care of ourselves, taking care of the earth, taking care of, really considering, what we're doing on the planet. So, I mean, I feel kind of even really just deeply sort of honored to be sitting with, and I hate to be talking about myself because I want to hear more stories. So I think that's why we do this workshop, that we get to, I get to hear about everyone. I mean, I think that's what's so valuable to me, hearing these little bits and pieces.
I have a question about the book. I was looking it up on Amazon. I could not find a book called The Hand. Do you know the author or exactly what the book title is?
It's Frank. I can email it to you later because Frank.
Frank Wilson.
That sounds right.
And how its uses shape the brain, language, and human culture. It's on Amazon. I just looked it up.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
I knew it was Frank and I was blanking on his last name.
Thanks.
So I think just coming together and learning from each other, I was thinking about this the other day, but there's so much that we explore in our craft practices, whatever that is, for sewing or doing shibori or dye work. But it's also really valuable to then go back and study the traditions, So, I mean, Suzanne, you're a shibori expert, and it's going back and kind of why are we making these patterns? Why is this? How does this connect to nature? What do we take from this? But coming back to kind of study these different specific ways of creating shibori is really valuable, because you kind of get that technique under your belt in your own way, and then you discover new things too. And so I feel like that's where the language of Yoshiko was talking a lot about this recently, but the language of shibori is you can connect with that all over the world. So like maybe we, connect with, the particular pattern that we're wearing or that we're creating, or, that's how we connect. And I just do, I'm bringing in the body movement part of it because I really feel like, and I don't know this, I'll have to ask Yoshiko about this, but I feel like the movement of the body kind of mixed in with the practice is really valuable, because I remember seeing in Arimatsu, older woman doing shibori, and she just was in one position for such a very long time. She was older woman doing this shibori as if she'd been sitting there doing this for, she had been sitting there doing this for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And it's really important to that's the meditation. But then I think that when we kind of open ourselves and, like Yoshiko was saying, go off in a different direction for a little bit, that's really important. That's what we bring back to some of these techniques.
You're on mute, Suzanne.
We all sort of have different, practices that we do daily, and kind of how do we bring those things into our shibori? That's a good question.
Did you learn construction of your pieces in school, or did you just have people help you with your pieces, or have you sewn so long that you just naturally did them?
It's funny. That's a really good question. I think, I grew up sewing, because of my mother. So it's like I made all my, prom dresses, and I loved being able to create what I wanted to wear. If I wanted to wear a purple dress. But I think most of what I learned was really when I got involved in costuming, and kind of learning to drape on the body and learning pattern making and different. So I don't come out of a fashion background. I did not go to fashion school. I am obsessive with a really sweet seam and stitch. And so I've done a lot of my own research on just all the different kinds of seams that exist out there. And, I will definitely spend a day working on how can I create a pocket that, looks as beautiful from the inside and the outside, and has a mix of like flat felled seaming and French seaming and all sorts of different seaming to create something that is beautiful inside and outside. I'm obsessed
wonderful.
with the inside and outside.
If we wanted to buy your clothing, would we go to your website? Is that how we best do it, or how do we do that?
I'm figuring that out right now.
Okay.
Because, with the pandemic hitting, I feel like I'm changing a little bit in how I'm doing things. I have some things up on my website, and I will have more over time. I think I'm sort of figuring out what and how I want to offer, because I really feel like I can offer some clothing, but I also feel like it's really valuable to teach people how to make what they want.
Oh, cool. Yes.
So I think, that little commercial breaks.
Little commercial breaks, time to recharge,
So, no, I was just going to say, I think it's really, Suzanne, this is why I'm so excited that you have this whole studio that you're offering this. It's like the more people can come back to a culture of making, of learning these different techniques. And, I still want to make and sell my work. So that will still happen. But I am questioning the size of the studio, you know, how many people I want in the studio. I mean, up until now, I've had anywhere from, you know, 1 to about 3 part-time people in the studio. And it's really valuable to have people in the studio. I love it. But on the same token, now I'm starting to think, well, maybe I do some of my own work for a while and, you know, come out to and I don't even like the word teaching, because I really think that when you come to teach, it's like everybody is learning together. It's such a process. It's, you know, I'm sharing my experience. You know, that's really what's happening. And through that, I can share what I know, what I've learned, and then, you know, everyone else, you know, as we're doing a little bit here, I wish there's more time to hear about everybody else's stories, but everybody's bringing something into that, and that's what you get from a workshop.
Do you make your pieces like one at a time? Are they one of a kind and there's no more, or do you have to try to recreate it in another size? Or
I do a mix of the two. So if I keep my, you know, recipes, you know, I can, you know, something, you know, like I can get a similar color, but as we all know, the bleed out might be a little different. So if you were to compare pieces, they're always a little bit different, but I do some limited, I don't even like to say production work, because I'm not a factory here, but limited edition sort of. I can do some, but sometimes I realize I can't always. And sometimes I'll tackle something and think I can do this, and then I go, oh, you know, I actually really can't create it exactly. Or what's interesting is when I get to know somebody, you know, they've wanted a particular piece, and then I get to know them and we talk, and I discover, oh, what they really liked about that piece was just the fabric, but what they really wanted was a totally different shape. So, you know, there's a lot of play in that, but it's a combination of the two. Although even in the limited edition work, it's still being made one at a time. You know, so I could make everything from start to finish, which is that's craft. You know, kind of like making everything holy is like from the beginning to the end is really, I mean, that is craft.
and it's all the different processes combined to get a different result.
Right.
And that's one of the things I'm finding in the studio, is that by offering katazome and rosome and shibori and dyeing, then people can take all those different skills and combine them together to create something that is their own, and not necessarily, you know, just a mass-produced piece that you see everywhere. I think that that's really important.
Yeah.
You know, I feel a lot of us in this particular age category, we grew up, we didn't have internet, we didn't have video games. And so we learned how to sew, we learned how to make things. And I think that kids right now are really missing that, particularly younger women or of this, like my daughter's generation. She never sewed. I mean, I had a sewing machine in the house all the time. She wasn't interested. And these younger women, and they're in their 40s, 30s, and 40s, and they come and they go, I never learned how to sew. Can you teach me how to sew? Or, you know, and understanding all the different processes is kind of important. You know, I'll have someone who will walk in and they'll see a bag. Now I took this bag, I created all the fabrics, I dyed everything, then I constructed the bag, then I did shishiko stitching on top of the bag. Then somebody will come in and they'll say, if I take your one-day class, can I make this bag? So what do you think is a good tip you can give an aspiring maker?
It's funny when you said all that with the bag, it made me think of Lindsay, who's on. I'm not seeing the full screen right now, but
He's
Lindsay.
here.
It just made me think of some of Lindsay's bags.
I have another one for you.
There she is.
Yay.
I'll put it in the mail this week.
I think it's not just about aspiring makers. I think it's also about really changing like the culture. So like how, and this is not a question I have an answer to. It's more of I guess I'm posing the question, but how do we make this into something that's really desirable for younger generations? Because right now is the time that we have for all of us to extend this beyond, so it's, to come to a workshop and have a small group of people taking the class or even on this talk, but then going beyond that, everyone's bringing this back into their communities. So I think my question is, how do we bring this into the culture? Because we all know, who've done this work, how healing it is. I mean, it keeps us sane. It's like, this is something that, through history it is one of the biggest parts of, social gathering, community, learning, healing. So, aspiring makers, I think it's really about practicing this, but it's also about how do we, as people who've been doing this, bring this into the community. I don't have all the answers for that, and I think there's different points of access. So, for me, a lot of the young generation who's so into yoga right now, let's just say as one point, sort of like, okay, well, do you know where your yoga pants came from? How were those made? What about making your own pants? Like, would that be of interest to you? So it's always finding that point of connection and then kind of circling that around. And likewise, then what do you learn if you're teaching, a young person who's into yoga to make pants? What's she teaching you about movement that you need, to really kind of maintain a healthy body as you age? So there's a lot of connection that can happen in this.
And also thinking about age, and so many of the really masterful instructors that we've all had over the years are all getting of an age where they want to retire. And so I'm finding that some of the younger instructors, they're doing like a make and take. It's like they want immediate results. They don't want to work through all the steps of learning all the different processes, and they want to come in and just make something to leave with it, versus coming in, making your own fabric, constructing your own garment, doing some stitching on top of it, and really learning about all the techniques and processes.
Mm-hmm.
And I experienced this too, Suzanne. I'm the master educator for the Fashion Incubator here in San Francisco. And each year we get 6 designers that come in, and they're usually young people from design schools. And they immediately want to know, okay, 1, 2, 3, and do I get a reward? Like, wait a minute. There's a lot more to this business than just making one garment and making money, and it was a real eye-opener to see how the 20s, they're usually in their 20s, early 20s up to early 30s. And it's a generation that feels that they can do something within a few days and get something done. And their work day is 10 to 3, where we used to work from 5 o'clock in the morning to midnight, to do our things. So it's a whole different attitude that you have to get through. It's very interesting.
Or they want to print fabrics. All this, make the fabric and then print it.
Yes.
There's a lot of that right now. even
We had that experience here too. And we have a printer in San Francisco that will do yardage, and they'll say, wow, it costs that much to do. And I said, wait a minute. It's just, they thought they could just probably go to the corner fabric store and get something for $10 a yard or something and make it up without even a thought. But anyway, just my 2 cents here.
It's funny because you definitely get that. I mean, at the craft shows, sometimes you have people who come in and look at the work and say, oh, like this is a lot of knowledge going into this. But then you have other people who come in and say, I just watched Project Runway last night. Where did you get the fabric? Is it from Mood? So
it's a challenge, you know. Do you have a typical day in your studio? Like, do you keep to a routine or a typical day?
I try to keep to a routine. I mean, I would say what's very funny, what keeps me to a routine more than anything else is having type 1 diabetes. You know, from a young age, it's like I have to, okay, it's time to give insulin. It's time to check my blood sugar. It's time to eat a meal. Thank goodness that grounds me. You know, because I think that like Yoshiko, I could go off in 1,000 directions. And so I come back to my health and my body. And then I kind of look at my list and go, okay, like I'm, you know, I need to take care of this order. I need to work on this. I need to, you know, I need to learn this technique because this is what I'm wanting to bring in. I need to, you know, finish these pieces for an exhibit. You know, there's so many things that are always going on. And, you know, my body grounds me. I have to come back to my health. I think, you know, I was just going to make a point that I think what's hard with the younger generations, and I feel like I'm sort of kind of in between, you know, the younger generations are coming in without much grounding or feeling like they can own property or have, you know, so there's a lot of, I think there's always this fear of like, oh, how do I monetize this?
Yes.
You know, there is definitely that. And I feel that because I've had to build a career where, you know, I'm selling my work, you know, that it's about survival. But on the same token, just for who I am and from how I've grown up, I can't seem to really do that well. Like so many people have said, why don't you go into mass production or do this or that? And I can't get away from the handwork. It's just such a part of who I am. That maybe to my own fault, you know? So, and I think the pandemic has really thrown a lot of people. And I know that, you know, I'm feeling behind on things right now. I'm feeling like I haven't, you know, my computer kind of exploded during the pandemic. So I'm trying to recreate my client database. So people who haven't heard from me are probably thinking, why haven't I heard from Amy? But you know, the reality is there's always so much to do. And you just, it's like that book, Bird by Bird, Anne Lamott, it's like, you just keep coming back and you just, you know, you just do what you can every day. So.
Do you have any examples of anything? You can show us, but I'll let you get this question.
Examples of, I heard
of
it.
Your work.
Examples of what? Of
some different pieces that you've done, some works that you're working on right now.
Well, right now I'm actually doing a lot of drawing and playing with katazome kind of stuff. So oh gosh, it's like, where to even start? I'm not going to show all my drawings yet. But gosh. I mean, that was one of the big things I'm working on right now. So I'm working on all this fabric will end up being, it's about 12 yards of fabric, but that's going to end up being a swing coat for a client that I'll post this online when I'm done with it. But mostly I've been, oh my goodness.
Do you cut your own stencils?
I do. Well, there's a mix of that. So just want to find. So I've been playing with, as I was talking about these scraps, I've been playing with different ways of taking that very simple shibori.
Right.
And then how do you deconstruct that? How do you stitch that? So that's kind of these are all that same piece of shibori, but stitched in different ways. You're kind of just playing. And then the katazome work, hang on one second.
Studio looks marvelous.
So this is all hand cut.
Oh, wow.
So I have a silhouette machine that you can cut papers with it. But what I've realized over time is that you can't get the edges that you want with it. So you can get some you can get certain things, but you don't get the hand with it. And I think when you're doing some of this katazome work, you just can't get the nuances that you get from the hand. So I started to do some of that silhouette work in actually cutting stencils and, thinking it would be a time saver, and it's not. For me, it's not in the way that I work. So, but what's interesting is that some of these patterns that I'm trying to kind of create, as John Marshall would say, a sort of library of patterns. What I'm working on now are shapes that I can block out some of these different kind of hand cut patterns that I'm doing. And then I can basically lay down sort of a template so I can cut shapes. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now. So playing with that, and the shibori, all those little samples that's the play stuff. And then all of this is the kind of like the orders of having to work on particular pieces. So I'll have kind of an endless supply of, I'm making the shirts. So just making a garment and then going in and doing all the stitch work on that. I tend to really, really like doing the hand stitch, like hand stitch nui. Yeah. I know that there's a Sashiko machine that I've discovered recently that can do the kind of the look of nui, but I don't like that work. I like to do the machine work and creating the garments and then go in and do hand work, because that's something that I can kind of like knitting, I can carry with me. I can go up and kind of visit my father. He had a stroke during the pandemic, so I can kind of go up on the train, bring one of these pieces and just stitch, and so that to me is really valuable, to have something that can kind of move with me.
Stitching, I think a lot of people are really getting interested in stitching right now, all different types of hand stitch and different things. I thought I was a pretty good sashiko stitcher until I brought a sashiko stitcher from Japan into the studio a couple weeks ago. And it's hard, to hold your needle and get that movement with your hand going, but it's like you said, the hand and getting a movement going, and that makes your stitching flow a lot better. Does anybody have any questions for Amy? Sharon?
I do. Yes, I do have a question. I want to kind of go back to the idea about the young people and the sort of how do we learn from other participants. So two things that came up for me recently. I have been following what's going on with the social justice sewing project, and it's, they talk about the techniques and the information that the directors and the leaders and the teachers in the project bring to the students. And they also talk about working with the students on what it is that they want to do and what it is that they want to say. And, you know, how do you blend those two things? So I think there is some interest from young people in creating something, and they maybe just don't have a context for understanding how long things take or how many processes can be involved. And, you know, and I remember being a young person and like wanting to make something cool and not understanding all of the stuff that was involved in it. And I think the other thing that came up for me recently was I got an email from the group that had been making masks here in Benicia, California. And there's a maker space that is looking for new board members. And they were very kind of sheepish about the fact that all of the people who are currently on the board of the makerspace are white men. And so they think, well, maybe they should have a little bit of diversity on their board. So I'm thinking about the interest that young people have in the idea of making and being makers, and how, I don't know that I want to be the person to integrate and diversify their board. But the idea of how do you work with young people and how do you kind of raise the visibility of textiles and clothing and, you know, all of the fabric things that are in our lives, in a context of makers, so that young people kind of see it and understand that that is also a direction that they can go in. So I'm curious to hear you talk about that, since you said that, you know, the things you said about teaching.
You know, it's interesting. I think that one of the interesting points, I mean, having been in my studio, I've had a lot of younger students from Mass Art who were interns and then turned employees. And when it's like, I'm not a business person. When I started running this studio, I kind of thought, okay, interns, let's have paid interns. So I paid my interns. I was like, I think that that's really important, that they start to understand the value of cloth. I mean, I think one of the things is, sadly, is that cloth and making certain things is not valued in society. It's kind of, it's been pushed down over the years. And to a certain degree, I don't know if paying them was the right answer or not. You know, I don't know. But what I do know that's interesting coming in is that there's a sense when you're younger of, you know, everything. We've all experienced that.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that, you know, and then you get to a certain age and you go, I don't know anything. But then that's when things start to get really better, I think, in a certain way, because you let go of a sense of like, you know, a need to, I don't know, you just let go a little bit. You start enjoying things a little bit more. And so, you know, just my first response to this question is like, Indigenous people. I feel like, you know, some of the, when I think about Native American tribes and Indigenous people, it's like there's so much respect for elders, you know, and what creates that? I'm not sure, because I didn't grow up that way, but I came to know that through studying so many different traditions. You know, I came to really feel like I know that, and I know the value of, you know, young and old, and even, I mean, what people would say good or bad is like, I don't really differentiate that. I really feel like, you know, even the people who, you know, are in society who are, you know, doing terrible things, it's like we have something to learn from them too. You know, I mean, I really feel like, you know, I think everyone teaches you, you know, everyone you come into contact with teaches you. But how, how do you communicate that? I think we can only communicate that through really like taking care of ourselves and bringing our best selves into the world, and kind of showing that and offering that. I kind of have come to terms with, like, I can't really fix anything. I can't, this is just me personally speaking, but I can't fix anything, but what I can bring to the table is what I know. That's it. That's all I come with. And, 47 years of that is valuable. It's like I have a lot of experience, but, someone older than me has that much more experience, and someone younger than me has a certain amount of experience too. But I think the question is, like, how do we gather around that? I was asked to be on a board this year, and I'm struggling with it because I feel like I need to be bringing my best self, and I think I don't know if I am. I don't know, these board structures, and I don't know if I'm able to offer everything. And then I come back and think, no, actually I'm offering exactly what's right. I'm offering, who I am and what I am. And if that changes things on the board, if I can bring in some diversity, great. That's great. It's like they ask somebody who, has a really different perspective. So, but I am really questioning that, because I feel like our culture and society it scares me. At the same time, I'm completely excited by it. So it's like, I don't know. But these questions come from like such deep conversations and learning from each other. And, I think about, coming back to sitting around and having a stitching circle, or, gathering a group of people together and doing movement on a lawn somewhere. It's like, these are the things, coming together in conversation, not even knowing. I came to this very unprepared, Suzanne, I have to say.
Well, I think you're doing great.
Can I speak for just a minute? Amy, it's Catherine L. And I just wanted to see how you had fared this last year and how you were doing. And it's been really fun to listen to you. And I'm glad that you're going down to Florida next spring. That's great.
Thank you. Well, and goodness, I'm looking through all my notes from your class. Oh my gosh, it's another 15 years of like needing to figure this out, Catherine and Joy was one of the last workshops that I actually took, and it was very valuable. Catherine, you're amazing.
Well, it's just kind of what we do.
But but the thing is, it's like you're in it. It's like you're in it. You're doing this work daily. You've got your amazing scientific notebooks. Mm-hmm. They're sort of scientific in terms of how detailed you are about these things. I was talking to somebody the other day about that, actually, about your notebooks and how impressed I am with them. So it's, we're so much learning from each other, and I'm bringing in a lot of different experiences into this. So I'm grateful for.
It's really good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Catherine.
I think the notebook keeping is like vital. I'm getting better at it. So many pieces I did a long time ago, I wish I would have kept better notes on how I did it, how I constructed things, and I didn't do it. I just didn't. And so I think keeping the notes and the samples and putting them all together, that's just a bit valuable. And you do go back to them. You go back, I go back to my notes. And I always make a joke because my very first indigo class I ever took was with Catherine in Asheville. And I went there and the whole class was full of very scientific people, chemistry type people. And I was just lost. And I left there saying, I'm never going to touch that stuff again. I will never do that again. But I still have the notes. And so I am able to go back to them and do it.
It's kind of honoring the process versus the object that might come out of it. Initially the object is sort of serendipitous. It happens or it doesn't happen, but the process needs to be honored too. No.
And bringing those perspectives together. I mean, it's like bringing the science perspective and the practice of doing. I mean, this is where I would say that as little as I understand about technology, it is so valuable. And the people who are on top of that end of it are bringing something to the table as well. Mm-hmm. But I think the issue is when we don't honor all of what's coming to the table, that's where we have issues in society. So, I mean, there's a lot you can learn from a circle of people sitting around sewing and like hanging out in the studio, and just
that's where an in-person class is so much different than a Zoom class. Did you do anything on Zoom teaching?
Actually, I've been starting to do some, I would say I'm kind of in a practice teaching group of teaching taichi. And what's interesting is that is actually helping me circle back to feeling like I can teach some of what I know about dyeing. But I'm having to go back to my dyeing books to remember, some of what I've learned from the dyeing. So it's all very much circling together. And I think it's giving me some of the work through the body, I mean, Tai Chi is so particularly, heavy body emphasis. But some of that work is actually helping me to have confidence in teaching my skills in textiles, which is very interesting. So it's just, I think it's different points of access. Mm-hmm. And I think, the other point is, textiles, it's such a broad field. How do you, somebody said the other day, like, oh, you're the shibori expert. I was like, no, I am not the shibori expert. I'm like the Amy expert. I am not a shibori expert. I am not a dye expert. I am not a tai chi expert. I just bring these things together and offer that experience.
It's a continuous learning process. I don't think you're ever finished learning.
No.
Right? It's continuous and you just keep learning. And the deeper you dive, the more you learn. And then it just gets a little more exciting as it comes.
And the hard part of it is along the way, how do you create a structure where you can survive from that? That is another reality. That's where, and I think that's where the younger generation is really, kind of feeling that stress. But the more you can kind of, I don't know, the more I let go and sort of relax into what makes sense to me, it's like actually the more it works. if that's, it's kind of it's a thing I can't explain.
So does anybody have any questions for Amy before we head off? This is a holiday weekend. It doesn't feel like a holiday weekend. I don't know.
Suzanne, I've got one. I was just wondering, Amy, when you do your katazome, what kind of paper stock are you using? Are you using poster board or what? That's
interesting. I have some traditional of the the shibugami paper from years ago, but I also, when I was studying with Akemi Kohn, she had introduced me to some of the synthetic paper, which I actually think is great too. Poster board I use with roketsuzome.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering too, because that's what I use. Yeah.
So, but I think it's a matter of playing with all of it, you know, and just really experimenting. But that's, I mean, for right now, that's what I'm kind of playing with.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is this weekend, I actually am experimenting with some, my plan for tomorrow is to experiment with coming back to Catherine, some of the mordant printing. So I have to do a little, just a kind of test with some things so I can figure out some colors. And I'm teaching a class coming up. And I hate to say teaching, leading, guiding, sharing. You know, I don't know, but I'm in a class coming up where I'm offering some of that knowledge that actually Catherine and Joy bring to the table with their amazing book. And so I'm just kind of dabbling in that over the weekend to see what I can kind of introduce to people. So it's a taster for Joy and Catherine's kind of amazing work, and Michelle Garcia. And I mean, it's just like, it's an endless, I have so many teachers that I'm so grateful for.
There's so many people that I've learned so much from, and I'm just finding it so exciting to be able to start combining a little bit from each class. And you know, I think one thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another, and so you build these building blocks to get to a certain thing, and then you try to have to figure out, okay, now I have to take all this stuff I know and put it together. And so I think that's an exciting part for what we're doing right now. And some of the newer things, deconstructing things and putting them back together. I just love it because I'm a texture person, you know. I was a weaver at one point, but I can't sit and do that all day. It just drives me crazy. So I do like the texture I can get from the different yarns and stuff. So this gives me an opportunity to dive in a little bit deeper.
I like putting it all together. That's a big part. And I was going to say about the poster board, Kiranada is the one who introduced me to the poster board for roketsuzome. So
yeah, me too.
I was curious about that because I'm like, I mean, it is such a great, I so appreciate Kira and all of her little, you know, her daubers and her just little ways of doing things like if you were, you know, had, you know, I think part of it is like thinking about what do we have in the house that we don't have to necessarily go out and like buy these really expensive. I mean, you can, if you want, buy really expensive things, but what could we also use? Like during the pandemic, what did you have in the house to work with? You know,
I just wanted to add to that. When you talk about things in the house, it was fun with Gaselli a couple of weeks ago because he's taking pieces of upholstery foam and cutting them and using them as styluses to draw with hot wax. And I'm like, I never thought of that before. So
that's
yeah,
great. That's great.
Can I ask, I've just been looking at your website and the garments that you've got online, which are beautifully and immaculately constructed. How long do they take you to do? It looks like they must take weeks.
They do. I mean, that's why there's not very many of them online. You know, it's like I and I'm a little bit behind making things in the studio. You know, what I try to do, if I have a few orders that are going, I'll try to put like things together. You know, like if I know that I have a like if I have an order for like, you know, a scarf like this or something, that's double nui, you know, folded shibori. You know, and if I know it's in this color that is one of my favorite colors, which is a mix of everything. It's blue, red and yellow, kind of all mixed in my dyes. It's not natural. I mean, I'm using fiber reactive there, but if I have, if somebody's ordered, let's say a scarf like this and a coat like this, like I had an order from the Smithsonian show, I'm going to try to create those together. And if I have a large enough vessel, dye those two together. Usually I'm dyeing one piece at a time, which is, it's not the most efficient. You know, I am not a factory here. So it is what it is. So it might take me, you know, it can easily take a week for a garment that's extensive, that has layering and all kinds of things. It might take longer. The dye process takes time because you're soaking things, you're letting them release the dyes, you're washing them. There's a lot of process going on. So I think something could take, the shortest amount of time would be 1 day for like a scarf. And that would be if I had purchased the fabric and I mitered the edges and then did all the stitching and did the dye work. But the reality is that I'm going to try to kind of put that into a framework of, you know, maybe I'm stitching a little bit on this, and then maybe I'm doing edge stitching on this, you know, later that day, because my body can't take doing one thing all at the same time. So I really frame my studio around that. And so, you know, I felt embarrassed, actually. I have to say that I didn't come to the Smithsonian show with a lot of pieces. And then I thought, you know what, this is what I have. You know, I have like 20 pieces right now. Like that's it. And I'll take an order, or I'll do, you know, but things can take anywhere from a day to 2 weeks, or, you know, longer.
It was just some of the garments that seemed to be composed of small sort of quilted pieces and things. Do you make the material first and then cut out the design for it, or do you create the material for the pattern that you're going to make?
It depends on the particular piece, but very often, I would say probably more often, I'm making the shibori and then cutting it, deconstructing it, piecing it. But sometimes, like that shirt I was showing, you know, I like to have a garment that's completed, that I can do all sorts of stitching and then just dye it. So it's a mix. But I think having the tools, you know, knowing the different processes allows me to do either. So I can either envision something, or I can go into a shirt like this and just stitch based on what I'm feeling. You know, maybe I want sharp edges, maybe I want to create wavy lines. Who knows? It's a cloudy day, so I'm feeling like I could stand to, maybe I'll dye some buckthorn again. Catherine gave me some great information on that when I was in the middle of doing that at some point. It didn't work out, and I wasn't supposed to add cream of tartar, you know, but
process and elimination.
Yeah.
I had one more question, if I could. Can you talk a little bit more about the cutting machine? You said you had the Silhouette. I found a Cricut machine, and somebody told me that you can use the Silhouette software with the Cricut machine. And I also was thinking about stencils when I got this. I haven't used it yet, but I'm curious to hear you talk about your experience with it and anything that you can share for the rest of us.
Well, I don't know the Cricut machine. The Silhouette I got probably about 4 years ago, because I was starting to want to create a library of katazome pieces, and it was good and bad. I mean, I found that one of the pieces I designed on it, let's just see if I can kind of run this over. I had made some like very sharp edge. Let's see if you can see. See that? Do you see that circular piece?
Oh, okay.
Like it's a half circle. That's very sharp edges, and so that was easy to design in Photoshop. You know, I was able to kind of create that and then put it into the silhouette machine and cut it. It turned out very easily with the kind of manufactured paper. But that other piece that I was showing you that I hand cut, what I couldn't do is I'm trying to remember what it was, but I was hand drawing some things and trying to put them into Photoshop. And I wasn't getting the kind of beauty of the hand in some of these markings. So I just kind of decided I need to hand cut some of these things, and maybe I'll have less, less stencils, but I think there's the ability to do a mix of the two. And it's something I need to learn more about. You know, I think that, maybe I'm not using the silhouette in the best way. Maybe there's better things I can do, because it's nice to have a fast stencil if you want to. But on the same token, I keep coming back to the hand. Like, I want to do the cut work. I want to do that. There's something that's so lovely about, and healing, I think, about cutting those little points and then taking the little point of the X-Acto blade and like pulling that out. And whereas when I was working on the silhouette machine, I had done a series of holiday cards at one point, and they were such a pain. They didn't cut fully through. And so I ended up having to kind of peel it off, and it didn't totally work. And then I was hand cutting things, and it drove me nuts. So, yeah, I think there's a balance, but maybe that's a class you could offer and share with us more about the Cricut. You know,
actually, there's Kim Barrow is on here. She has a silhouette. I have a Cricut, and Kim is like a silhouette expert at cutting stencils.
So I could stand to learn more of that for sure. But the hand, I always come back to the hand, and I think what that means is it means I take time for that. You know, I would prefer to sit here and do that and have a couple of friends maybe working on their own projects than I would to go out on the town on a Saturday night. You know, it's just choices.
Is already filled, and it is probably could do 2 classes. There's been that much interest in it.
Wow.
But yeah, so everybody is very interested, and a lot of the people who are on here come to the studio, and I know they all have a lot to offer. I'm really excited to see what they're going to come up with when they start combining things.
Well, and I think that's what we all, you know, that again, it's like that's what we bring to the table, because I don't have all the expertise. There's just no way, you know.
Right. So does anybody else have any questions before we head off for our Memorial Day weekend? And well, Kim says you can use a hand drawing and scan it to cut. Also do a test cut on your material before you cut a stencil. She's my silhouette stencil person.
Kim, can you put your email in there? Like,
she is good at cutting stencils.
She's also good at doing batik.
She's also, yeah.
I just want to say thank you, Amy. For me, it was the body-mind textile connection. So thank you, and I'll see you. When is it? January? Is that when the class is?
It is. It's in January.
Thank you so much.
February 21 to 25.
Ah, okay. February. Thank you.
Yeah.
That will be a nice time to be out of Boston.
It will, and then we can all. I was going
to see somebody was asking about linen in there. I most of my supplies I get from Dharma and from test fabrics. And then over the years, I found Libico. And I have a whole slew of fabrics from my mom, who is a seamstress. So it's kind of a mix of those few places. I just wanted to answer that. So.
Thanks much.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you for joining us this week, Amy. And I thank everybody else for joining us. And I'm going to start doing these again, probably come September. We travel in the summer, and I don't know how my internet is once we get on the road. So it's time for a break. And I just want to thank everybody and have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Nice
Bye-bye.
to see you.
Have a good summer.